Karl Marx was born in the small town of Trier, Germany, on May 5, 1818. It was a quiet and peaceful town, surrounded by the beauty of nature. The world was changing quickly around him. In many places, old kingdoms were falling apart, and new ideas were spreading. This was a time of great uncertainty and excitement. But it was also a time when people were asking big questions about life, society, and the future. Karl's family was important to him. He was born into a Jewish family, but things were not as simple as they might seem. His father, Heinrich Marx, was a lawyer. Heinrich was a smart man who believed in the power of education. He thought that education and reason were the keys to a better life. He wanted the best for his children. He also believed that religion could hold them back. At that time in Germany, Jewish people faced many challenges. They were not allowed to do certain jobs, and many people looked down on them because of their religion. To protect his family from these problems, Heinrich made a difficult decision. When Karl was still a young boy, Heinrich decided to convert to Christianity. This was a big change for the Marx family. By becoming Christians, they hoped to avoid the discrimination they had faced as Jews. This decision was not just about religion. It was also about fitting into society and making life easier for the family. But this change had a deep impact on Karl. As Karl grew older, he started to think more about religion. He wondered why people believed in certain things and how these beliefs affected their lives. This question about religion and belief would stay with Karl for a long time. It would even become an important theme in his writings later in life. Karl was an intelligent and curious child. He loved to learn. His father encouraged him to read and think for himself. Heinrich made sure their home was filled with books and ideas. Karl read many books about history, philosophy, and the stories of great thinkers from the past. He was particularly interested in learning about history and understanding why the world was the way it was. Karl's desire to understand the world around him grew stronger as he got older. He wanted to know how everything worked and why things happened the way they did. Karl was also full of energy. He wasn't just a quiet boy who read books all day. He was always thinking about how things could be different. He wanted to change the world, even though he didn't fully understand it yet. He wanted to find ways to make the world a better place. This desire to change the world became one of the most important parts of Karl's life. The world around Karl was changing too. People were starting to question old ideas about society and the government. New ideas about freedom, equality, and justice were becoming more popular. Many people were talking about revolution, which meant changing the government and the way society was organized. They wanted a world where everyone was treated fairly and had the same opportunities. These ideas fascinated Karl, but they also worried him. He asked himself, could these dreams really come true? What would happen if they did? Karl's family life was comfortable, but it wasn't without challenges. His father worked hard to provide for them, but the times were tough. The Marx family, like many other families, felt the pressure of living in a world that was always changing. Sometimes it felt like everything was uncertain, and the future was full of unknowns. This feeling of uncertainty would stay with Karl for the rest of his life. It was something he would think about as he got older. As a teenager, Karl went to school in Trier. He was an excellent student, always at the top of his class. But Karl wasn't just interested in getting good grades. He wanted to learn everything he could about the world. He studied subjects like literature, history, science, and philosophy. He was especially drawn to the great philosophers who had asked big questions about life and society. Karl wanted to understand these questions too, and maybe even find some answers. Karl was not an easy student to teach. He was full of energy and always questioned the rules. If something didn't make sense to him, or if he didn't agree with it, he would speak up. Sometimes this caused problems at school. His teachers admired his intelligence, but they also worried about his rebellious nature. They saw in Karl a young man who was not content with the world as it was. He wanted to make things better, even if it meant challenging the rules. Karl's rebellious nature stayed with him as he grew older. It was a part of who he was. He wasn't afraid to stand up for what he believed in, even if it meant going against authority. This attitude would help him later in life as he became a leader in the fight for social change. After finishing school in Trier, Karl went to the University of Bonn. Bonn was a lively city with many students and ideas, but Karl didn't take his studies seriously at first. He spent more time partying and getting into trouble than studying. His father, Heinrich, was not happy about this and decided to send Karl to a different university. He sent Karl to the University of Berlin, a more serious place where he hoped Karl would focus on his studies. In Berlin, Karl was introduced to the philosophy of a man named Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel's ideas fascinated Karl. Hegel believed that history was a process of constant change. He said that history was a struggle between opposing forces. These ideas helped Karl understand the world's conflicts and transformations better. But Karl didn't just want to understand the world. He wanted to change it. He began to think about how Hegel's ideas could be applied to society, to the struggles between rich and poor, powerful and powerless. At the University of Berlin, Karl also joined a group of young thinkers who were known as the Young Hegelians. These were people who wanted to change the old ways of thinking. They believed that the old ideas about religion and politics needed to be questioned. Karl loved being part of this group. They spent long hours debating philosophy, politics, and religion, and Karl was at the center of these discussions. But his involvement with the Young Hegelians brought him into conflict with the authorities. The government was worried about the ideas these young radicals were spreading. Karl's writings and speeches began to attract attention. Some people supported him, while others were angry at what he was saying. But Karl didn't care about making friends. He cared about speaking the truth and exposing the injustices he saw in the world. Even though he was becoming known as a troublemaker, Karl pushed forward with his ideas. He was determined to make a difference. This was just the beginning of Karl's journey. He was still young, and there was much more for him to learn. He had a long road ahead, but his passion for change and his desire to create a better world would stay with him for the rest of his life. Karl Marx was not just another philosopher. He was a man who would change the course of history. His ideas would inspire generations to come, and the world would never be the same. Karl Marx's time at the University of Berlin marked a significant chapter in his intellectual development. At the university, Karl encountered a world of new ideas and challenging debates. He had already shown his brilliance as a student in Trier, but in Berlin, he found himself in a place where thinkers from all over Europe gathered, exchanging ideas and philosophies. This was the place where Karl's ideas about life, society, and history truly began to take shape. Karl became deeply influenced by the philosophy of a German thinker named Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel's ideas about history and society fascinated Karl. Hegel believed that history was always changing, moving forward through a process of conflict. He argued that the world was constantly evolving, driven by the struggle between opposing forces. This idea of constant change became something that Karl would carry with him throughout his life. Karl did not just accept Hegel's ideas without question. Instead, he thought deeply about them and began to develop his own thoughts. He agreed with Hegel that change was a constant force in history. But Karl wanted to apply this idea to society. He asked himself, what kind of changes were happening in the world? What forces were shaping the lives of people? And how could those changes lead to a better, more just world? At the University of Berlin, Karl joined a group of young thinkers known as the Young Hegelians. This group was made up of students and intellectuals who were deeply interested in the ideas of Hegel. But they also wanted to take these ideas further. They believed that the old ways of thinking about society, religion, and politics needed to be questioned. They wanted to challenge the traditions that had been in place for so long and create a new way of understanding the world. The young Hegelians spent long hours debating and discussing ideas. They argued about philosophy, politics, and religion, questioning everything that society had taken for granted. Karl was very much a part of these discussions, but he was also keen on exploring his own ideas. His contributions to these debates made him stand out. He was determined to apply the concept of constant change to the way society functioned, hoping to reshape the world around him. At the same time, Karl began to realize that the world was not just evolving on its own. The changes were driven by specific forces, particularly the struggles between different groups. Karl believed that the relationship between the ruling classes and the working classes was one of the central conflicts of history. The rich and powerful controlled most of the wealth and resources, while the poor and oppressed worked hard to survive. This conflict, Karl argued, was the key to understanding the history of society. In Berlin, Karl's thoughts about society and history began to take a more political turn. He became involved in radical political movements, and his ideas began to shape his actions. He believed that it was not enough to simply understand the world. He wanted to change it. He felt a deep connection to the struggles of the poor and oppressed, and he began to think about how his ideas could be applied to create a more just world. However, Karl's political ideas were not welcomed by everyone. As he became more involved in radical politics, he found himself at odds with the authorities. The government, the church, and other powerful institutions were not happy with Karl's ideas. They saw him as a threat to the established order, and they were determined to silence him. The more Karl wrote and spoke out against the government, the more resistance he faced. Yet this only fueled his determination. Karl's involvement in political activism brought him into conflict with the authorities. The government began to censor his writings, and they made it difficult for him to continue his work. But Karl did not give up. In fact, the more the government tried to silence him, the more determined he became. He believed in his ideas and was willing to fight for them, no matter the cost. Karl's time in Berlin was a turning point in his life. It was here that he began to shape the ideas that would make him one of the most important thinkers in history. It was also the beginning of his journey into political activism. He realized that his ideas were not just about understanding the world, they were about changing it, and that would be his mission for the rest of his life. At this time, Karl was also beginning to realize that the path ahead would not be easy. He was up against powerful forces. The government, the church, and the ruling classes all had a vested interest in keeping things the way they were. But Karl believed that the world could be better. He believed that people could be free from oppression, that they could live in a world of equality and justice. This vision would guide him as he moved forward on his journey. In Berlin, Karl began to see himself not just as a student, but as a leader. He was part of a movement of young thinkers who wanted to change the world. He was ready to fight for his ideas and to stand up against the powers that tried to silence him. This was just the beginning of Karl Marx's journey, but it was a journey that would have a profound impact on the world. His ideas would inspire millions, spark revolutions, and change the course of history. This chapter in Karl's life was not just about learning and thinking, it was about taking action. It was about standing up for what he believed in and fighting for a better world. Karl Marx was no longer just a young thinker. He was becoming a revolutionary. His ideas would spread and his voice would be heard. The world was about to change, and Karl Marx would play a key role in that change. As Karl Marx continued his time at the University of Berlin, his journey into revolutionary thinking became clearer. He was no longer just a student absorbed in books. He was becoming a rebel. Karl had always been curious, but now his curiosity turned into a deep desire to change the world. His university years were marked by intellectual growth and radical ideas that would set him apart from others and eventually influence millions. At Berlin, Karl had discovered a passion for ideas that challenged the status quo. He was drawn to philosophy, history, and political theory that pushed the boundaries of conventional thinking. He began questioning not just the traditional ideas of the past, but the entire structure of society itself. How could the rich continue to grow wealthier while the poor suffered? Why were people forced to live under such oppressive conditions? These questions, which had been in his mind for a long time, now became the focus of his intellectual work. Karl soon became involved with the Young Hegelians, a group of radical thinkers who also questioned traditional authority. The Young Hegelians were inspired by the ideas of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, but they went further, challenging not just religion but the whole system of politics and economics. For Karl, joining this group was like finding his true calling. He found like-minded individuals who believed that society needed to change drastically. Together, they explored ideas about freedom, justice, and the need for a revolution to overthrow the current system. But Karl's involvement with the Young Hegelians was not without risk. The ideas they were discussing were seen as dangerous by the authorities. In many parts of Europe, including Germany, the government feared these radical ideas. They worried that these young thinkers might inspire a rebellion, a revolution, and they were right to be afraid. Karl, with his powerful writings and fiery speeches, was becoming a figure who could influence others to challenge the existing power structures. The government knew that someone like Karl could be a threat to their control. Despite the growing danger, Karl's rebellious nature only grew stronger. He did not shy away from conflict, but instead leaned into it. The more he saw the injustices in the world, the more determined he became to fight against them. Karl knew that in order to change society, he would have to challenge the powerful elites who were benefiting from the suffering of the working class. The rich and powerful would not give up their wealth and influence willingly, and Karl was ready to fight for the changes he believed in. Karl's rebellious spirit was not just about fighting for abstract ideas, it was about fighting for the people who were suffering. He believed that the working class, the poor and oppressed, were the key to changing the world. They were the ones who had the power to bring about revolution. The rich and powerful, Karl argued, were only able to maintain their control because the working class allowed them to. If the working class could rise up and unite, they could overthrow the system and create a society that was fairer for everyone. Karl's writings began to reflect this passion for change. He started to write articles, essays, and pamphlets that criticized the existing political and economic systems. His words were sharp, direct, and filled with anger at the injustice he saw. He wrote about how capitalism, the economic system that dominated Europe at the time, was inherently flawed. In his view, capitalism was a system that exploited the workers, taking advantage of their labor while rewarding the rich who owned the factories and land. The workers, Karl believed, were the true creators of wealth, but they were not getting what they deserved. As Karl continued to write, his ideas began to spread. People who shared his frustrations with the existing system began to take notice. Karl's work inspired some, but it also made others angry. The authorities saw Karl as a dangerous figure. He was challenging not only the political leaders, but also the very foundation of society. To the government, Karl was a threat. His ideas could stir up unrest and challenge the order they had fought so hard to preserve. In the face of growing opposition, Karl did not back down. He became more outspoken, more determined to fight for what he believed in. His writings were banned in Germany, and he was often forced to move from place to place, running from the authorities who were eager to silence him. But no matter where he went, Karl's ideas continued to grow. His writing became his weapon, and he used it to attack the system he saw as unjust. Karl's rebellious nature also led him to challenge the social and political systems in his personal life. He wasn't interested in following the rules just because they had always been there. He wanted to create a world where people could be free, where they could live in equality and justice. His rebellion was not just against the government, but against all forms of oppression. This rebellious spirit did not come without its cost. Karl's life was filled with struggles. He faced poverty, illness, and constant threats from the authorities. But through all of this, he never lost sight of his goal. He believed that the world could be better. He believed that by challenging the status quo, he could help create a new society, one that was fairer and more just for everyone. Karl's time as a rebel was just the beginning of his journey. He would go on to write some of the most important works in history, including the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, works that would inspire revolutions around the world. But his time at the University of Berlin was the foundation of his rebellious thinking. It was here that Karl's ideas about revolution, justice, and equality began to take shape. And it was here that he made the decision to dedicate his life to fighting for those ideas. Karl's story as a rebel is a reminder that great change often comes from those who dare to challenge the system. Rebellion is not just about fighting against those in power, it is about fighting for a better world. Karl Marx's rebellion was not about personal gain. It was about the belief that society could be improved, that the world could be more just for the working class, the oppressed, and the poor. As Karl Marx moved forward in his life, he carried with him the spirit of rebellion. He was not afraid to stand up against the injustices he saw. And though the road ahead would be difficult, Karl knew that he was on the right path. He had become a thinker who would change the world, a rebel who would leave a lasting legacy. Karl Marx's life took a new turn when he met Jenny von Westphalen. Jenny was not just a beautiful young woman. She was intelligent, strong-willed, and shared many of Karl's beliefs about the world. She came from a noble family, with connections to the higher social classes of Prussia, while Karl's background was much humbler. Despite these differences, their love for each other grew stronger. Jenny saw something special in Karl, a passion and a fire that she admired. Karl, in turn, was drawn to her beauty, her intelligence, and her strong personality. Their love was not easy. Jenny's family did not approve of their relationship at first. They thought that Karl, being a radical thinker and from a less wealthy family, was not the right match for their daughter. However, Jenny believed in Karl and in his ideas. She saw in him a man who could change the world. They spent countless hours discussing ideas about justice, freedom, and revolution. Jenny supported Karl through the challenges he faced, and together they became partners in both love and struggle. However, their life together was far from easy. Karl was deeply committed to his revolutionary ideas. He believed that the old system needed to be overthrown, and that the workers should rise up to take control of their lives. But these ideas were dangerous, and the authorities in Germany were watching him closely. They saw Karl as a threat to the social order. His writings were banned, and he was forced to move from city to city to avoid arrest. Despite the growing danger, Karl and Jenny's love never wavered. Jenny was by his side through all the struggles. She supported him, even when life was difficult, even when they had very little money, and when their health suffered from the stress of constant moves and financial instability. They both believed that their love and their ideas could change the world, and this belief kept them going. While Karl's ideas were becoming more radical, Jenny was also finding her place in this new world. She came from an aristocratic family, but her beliefs aligned with Karl's vision for a more just world. She believed that the current system of exploitation and oppression needed to end. She saw how the poor and working-class people suffered, and she was not afraid to stand by Karl's side as he challenged the authorities. Jenny's loyalty to Karl was unshakable. She not only supported him emotionally, but also helped him in practical ways, often managing the household while Karl focused on his writing and revolutionary work. Karl and Jenny's relationship was tested in many ways. The struggle for their ideas was exhausting. Karl worked long hours, writing and researching, while Jenny did everything she could to keep their lives together. They both knew that they were part of something much bigger than themselves. They were fighting not just for their own happiness, but for a world where justice and equality would prevail. As they struggled together, Karl's ideas began to take shape more clearly. He started to see that the world's problems were not random or accidental. The poor and working-class people, he realized, were not suffering because of bad luck. They were suffering because the rich and powerful people who owned the factories, the land, and the resources controlled the system. The capitalists, as Karl called them, were getting richer by exploiting the labor of the workers. This inequality, Karl believed, could only be fixed by a revolution. The workers had to rise up, take control, and create a new world based on equality. Karl's writing became more focused on these ideas. He started to write about how the capitalist system worked and how it needed to be replaced by a system where the workers controlled the means of production. His most famous work, The Communist Manifesto, written with Friedrich Engels, laid out these ideas in clear and powerful language. The manifesto called on workers to unite and rise against the capitalist system that oppressed them. It was a call for revolution. But even as Karl's ideas became more revolutionary, his personal life continued to be a struggle. They were often poor, and Jenny's family continued to disapprove of their relationship. Karl faced health problems, and the stress of their difficult lives took a toll on both of them. Jenny and Karl's children also became victims of the harsh life they were living. Their first child, a daughter, died at a young age, and this loss broke both of them. Karl, however, never stopped working. He believed that even in the face of such personal tragedy, the revolution had to continue. Jenny, too, was deeply affected by their struggles, but she never gave up on Karl or their shared vision. She believed in his ideas and knew that their fight for justice was worth all the hardships. She stayed strong, taking care of their children and managing their home while Karl continued his work. Together, they faced the many challenges of revolutionary life, but their love never faltered. They both understood that they were part of a much larger movement, a movement that could change the world. Their love story is one of great strength, loyalty, and sacrifice. Jenny was not just Karl's wife. She was his partner in the struggle for a better world. She believed in him and in his vision for a new society, even when it seemed impossible. Jenny's unwavering support helped Karl to keep going, even when the road was difficult and the future uncertain. She stood by him through all the challenges, from poverty to loss, and together they faced the world with courage and hope. Karl and Jenny's story is a reminder that love and struggle are often intertwined. Their love was not just about happiness or romance. It was about fighting for something greater, something that could change the world for the better. It was about standing by each other through thick and thin, even when the world seemed against them. Together, they dreamed of a society where everyone could live free from oppression and exploitation. And though they did not live to see that dream come true, their ideas continued to inspire future generations. Their lives were a struggle, but it was a struggle that had meaning. They were fighting for a better world, and they did so together, with love, loyalty, and a shared commitment to justice. Their story is not just the story of two people in love, but the story of two people whose love and ideas helped shape the future. Karl and Jenny's relationship is a testament to the power of love and struggle in the fight for a better world. Karl Marx and Jenny von Westphalen shared a deep and powerful love, but their journey together was not easy. Their love story began with great passion, as Jenny was captivated by Karl's intelligence and dedication to changing the world. Karl, in turn, admired Jenny's beauty, strength, and unwavering belief in justice. Although they came from different backgrounds, Jenny from a noble family and Karl from a more modest one, they found common ground in their desire to make the world a better place. But their love was tested by the struggles they faced. Jenny's family did not approve of Karl, considering him a radical thinker with dangerous ideas. They believed that Karl, with his dreams of revolution, was not the right match for their daughter. However, Jenny stood by Karl, believing in his vision and in him as a person. She knew that his ideas could change the world, even if it meant facing hardships. Their life together was full of challenges. Karl's revolutionary ideas put him in danger. His writings were censored, and he was often forced to move from city to city to avoid arrest. Despite these difficulties, Jenny remained by his side. She supported him emotionally and helped him manage the practical aspects of their lives. They had little money and lived in poverty, but their commitment to each other and to their cause kept them going. Karl's ideas about the world and the need for a revolution became stronger as time passed. He believed that the capitalist system, which made the rich richer and the poor poorer, had to be destroyed. He wrote about this in his famous work, The Communist Manifesto. The manifesto called for workers to rise up against the capitalists, to fight for a fairer and more equal society. However, the personal sacrifices they made were heavy. Karl and Jenny faced the pain of losing their children to illness. This loss was heartbreaking for them, but they kept fighting for their vision of a better world. Jenny's love and support helped Karl through these tough times. She believed in his ideas, even when they were not popular, and she was willing to face the struggles of revolutionary life with him. Their love story is a reminder that love and struggle are often intertwined. Karl and Jenny were not just lovers, they were partners in the fight for justice. Their shared passion for a better world kept them going even in the hardest of times. Their story shows how love can be a source of strength during difficult times. It is also a story of commitment, both to each other and to a cause greater than themselves. Through their struggles, Karl and Jenny proved that love is not just about romance or happiness. It is about standing by each other through challenges, supporting each other's dreams, and fighting for a better future. Their love story was a story of partnership, sacrifice, and a shared belief in a better world. They may not have lived to see that world come to be, but their ideas continue to inspire others, showing that love and revolution can go hand in hand. Karl Marx's journey was one of deep commitment to ideas, a passion for justice, and an unwavering belief in a better world. He lived a life full of struggles, but he never gave up on his vision of equality, fairness, and the power of the people. From his early life in Trier to his later years in London, Marx's life was a story of resilience, intellectual growth, and the fight for a better society. Throughout his life, he faced many hardships, including poverty, personal losses, and the constant threat of exile and arrest. Yet his commitment to his revolutionary ideas never wavered. Karl's ideas about capitalism, class struggle, and the need for revolution shaped the future of many movements across the world. His work, including the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, inspired countless individuals to question the world around them, to challenge injustice, and to seek change. His ideas continue to influence political thought and social movements to this day. But Karl's life was not just about his intellectual work. It was also about his personal struggles, his love for Jenny von Westphalen, and the partnership they shared. Jenny supported Karl through all the difficulties they faced, and their love was a source of strength that helped them endure the challenges of revolutionary life. Although Karl Marx did not live to see the world he dreamed of, his work has left a lasting impact. His ideas were radical for his time, but they have continued to inspire people around the world to fight for justice, equality, and the rights of workers. Karl Marx's story teaches us the importance of standing up for what we believe in, even when the path is difficult and full of challenges. It reminds us that change does not come easily, and that the fight for a better world requires sacrifice, determination, and patience. It is also a reminder that love and support from those we care about can give us the strength to keep going, even when things seem impossible. The lesson we can learn from Karl Marx's story is that we should never give up on our beliefs, no matter how difficult the journey may be. Life will always have obstacles, but it is our commitment to our values and our ability to keep fighting for what is right that will define us. Just as Karl's ideas continue to shape the world today, we too can make a difference in our own lives and in the lives of others by standing up for justice and equality. As you've listened to this story, you've not only learned about Karl Marx's life, but also improved your understanding of English. Congratulations on reaching this point. Your ability to listen, understand, and engage with this story has helped you become better at understanding English in real-life contexts. Keep up the great work, and remember that learning a language is a journey, just like the one Karl Marx took. If you've enjoyed this story and would like to continue improving your English skills, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us create more engaging content to help you on your learning journey. Thank you for listening, and I hope you continue to grow in your language skills. Keep learning, keep listening, and keep striving for the better world you want to see.